My name is Ahmed Hassan. I am 34 years old, and on October 28th, 2025, I died for 23 minutes. What happened during those 23 minutes changed everything I believed about God, about Jesus, and about my faith as a Muslim. This is my testimony. I was born and raised in Dearborn, Michigan, home to the largest Muslim community in America. My father, Imam Rashid Hassan, has led prayers at Al Noor Mosque for 20 years. My mother is a devoted Muslim who has never missed a single prayer and has worn full hijab since she was 16 years old. In our house, Islam wasn't just religion, it was identity, culture, everything. I was more devout than most Muslims I knew. I had prayed 5 times daily since I was 12 years old, never missing Fajr, never skipping a single prayer time. I married my wife, Fatima, when I was 26, and we have 3 beautiful children, Layla, who's 8, Omar, who's 6, and little Zara, who just turned 4. Monday morning, October 28th, 2025. I woke up at 5:30 a.m. for Fajr prayer, just like I had every morning for over 20 years. I performed my ablutions, spread my prayer rug in our bedroom, and began my morning prayers facing Mecca. I was in the middle of sujud, the prostration position, saying Subhana Rabbiyal Ala, when everything changed. One moment I was praising Allah in perfect submission. The next moment, everything went completely black. Fatima found me collapsed on my prayer rug, unconscious, not breathing. She called 911 screaming. The paramedics arrived 8 minutes later, but by then it was too late. At Beaumont Hospital, Dr. Sarah Chen pronounced me clinically dead at 6:23 a.m. For the next 23 minutes, the medical team worked frantically to bring me back while my heart showed a completely flat line. But ask yourself this question: where was I during those 23 minutes? Because I certainly wasn't in that hospital room. What I experienced in those 23 minutes will challenge everything you think you know about death, about Jesus, and about the weather that's about to hit our country in the next few days. The last thing I heard in my physical body was my wife screaming my name. Then silence. Complete, absolute silence that was somehow louder than any sound I'd ever experienced. The heart monitor showed a flat line as Dr. Sarah Chen began leading the emergency resuscitation team, but from my perspective, I was suddenly floating above my body, watching everything unfold below me. I could see myself lying there on that hospital bed, my face peaceful in a way that startled me. My beard was still damp from the ablution water I'd used for morning prayers. The medical team worked frantically, pumping my chest, injecting medications, trying desperately to restart my heart. But I felt completely detached from that scene, as if I were watching a movie about someone else's life. What struck me most was that I could see Fatima in the hallway outside my room. She had collapsed onto her prayer rug, the same one I'd been using when my heart stopped, and she was making desperate dua to Allah, begging Him to bring her husband back. Tears streamed down her face as she pressed her forehead to the ground in sujud, her whole body shaking with grief. I wanted to reach out and comfort her, to tell her I was right there, but I couldn't touch anything in the physical world. This wasn't what I expected at all. According to everything I'd been taught in Islam, the moment of death should bring the angels Munkar and Nakir, who would begin questioning me about my faith. I should have been facing immediate judgment, accounting for every deed I'd ever done. Instead, there was this incredible sense of waiting, as if I were in some kind of holding place that felt both foreign and familiar at the same time. I remained floating there for what felt like several minutes, completely free from any physical pain or discomfort. My thinking was clearer than it had ever been in life. Every memory was sharp, every emotion was vivid, but there was no confusion or panic. Instead, I felt an overwhelming sense of anticipation, like something monumentally important was about to happen. Then I began to move. It wasn't voluntary movement, more like I was being drawn by an invisible current that I couldn't resist and didn't want to. I passed through the hospital walls as if they were made of air, moving away from the emergency room where my physical body lay dying. I remember thinking, is this the barzakh, the Islamic concept of the waiting place between death and the day of judgment? As I moved further from the hospital, I found myself approaching what I can only describe as a tunnel, but not like the typical near-death experience stories you hear about. This tunnel was made of the most beautiful golden light I'd ever seen, but the light had personality and intelligence. It wasn't just illumination, it was alive, warm, and welcoming, in a way that defied every expectation I had about death and judgment. I kept waiting for the Sirat, the razor-thin bridge over hell that every Muslim must cross, but instead the light grew warmer and more inviting with each moment. Then I saw him. At the end of the tunnel, I saw a figure clothed in brilliant white robes that seemed to emit their own light. My first thought was immediate denial. This must be a mistake. In Islam, we're taught that Jesus, or Isa as we call him, was indeed a great prophet, one of the most revered messengers of Allah, but certainly not divine. Yet somehow, without any explanation or introduction, I knew exactly who this was standing before me. Every fiber of my being, if I still had fibers, recognized him as Jesus Christ. Not the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus from Western paintings that always seemed so foreign to my Middle Eastern eyes, but a Jesus who looked like he belonged in my community in Dearborn. His skin was olive-toned, his hair was dark, and his features were unmistakably Middle Eastern. He looked like he could have been my cousin, my neighbor, someone I might pass on the street near the mosque. When he spoke, his voice contained every comforting word that had ever been spoken, concentrated into pure sound. Ahmed, my beloved son, I have been waiting for you. The love radiating from those words silenced every theological argument I'd ever learned, every defense I'd built up against Christian doctrine over 34 years of devout Islamic faith. But my religious training fought back hard. Everything in my Islamic education screamed that this encounter was impossible. Muslims believed Jesus was taken up to heaven without dying. Yes, but he was still just a man, a prophet like Muhammad. We don't worship Jesus. We don't pray to Jesus, and we certainly don't believe he has the authority to greet souls in the afterlife. That role belongs to Allah alone. Yet as these thoughts raced through my mind, Jesus responded as if he could hear every one of them. Your prayers were never unheard. Ahmed, every Allahu Akbar you spoke reached my Father's ears. Every time you prostrated yourself in worship, I was there. His words weren't accusatory or corrective. They were filled with such tender understanding that I felt 34 years of religious certainty crumbling and rebuilding simultaneously. Muhammad was a man seeking truth, just as you have been seeking truth your entire life, Jesus continued. But the message became clouded by human interpretation over the centuries. Your people call me Isa, and they are right to honor me as they do. But Ahmed, I'm not just a prophet pointing toward God. I am God made known to humanity. He began explaining concepts that had always troubled me about Christianity. The Trinity wasn't three separate gods competing for worship, but one God existing in perfect relationship. We are not three gods, Ahmed, but one God in perfect unity. When your people declare La ilaha illallah, there is no God but God, they speak truth. I am not separate from Allah. I am Allah made flesh, walking among the people I created. As these revelations washed over me, Jesus gestured toward the earth below us. Suddenly, I could see everything with supernatural clarity, as if someone had given me divine satellite vision combined with meteorological instruments I didn't know existed. Look down at your homeland, Ahmed. I'm about to show you something that will confirm everything I'm telling you is true. What I saw next defied every law of physics I'd ever learned. Jesus pointed toward the Atlantic Ocean, and suddenly I could see Hurricane Melissa with perfect clarity, as if I were looking at the most advanced weather radar system ever created, but from a divine perspective. The hurricane was still maintaining Category 1 strength as it passed near Bermuda, exactly as Jesus had shown me moments before. Watch her path, Ahmed, Jesus said, his voice carrying absolute authority over the natural world. Your meteorologists can see the present storm, but I will show you her entire journey from beginning to end. As he spoke, I watched Melissa's future unfold like a time-lapse movie. The hurricane would continue moving northeast into the far northern Atlantic Ocean, transforming into an extratropical system by the end of that very day. But here's what left me speechless. Jesus showed me exactly where Melissa would go after leaving the American coast. By November 8th, her remnants will bring high wind gusts and heavy rain to Iceland and the United Kingdom. Your weather services won't predict this path with such precision until days later. But I'm showing you now so that when you return to your body, you'll have proof that this encounter was real. Then Jesus directed my attention to the northeastern United States, where I could see a massive low-pressure system forming across New England. This storm is happening right now, as your physical body lies in that hospital bed. He explained, very high winds and rainfall are striking the northeast at this very moment. It's like a nor'easter, but without snow and without the typical heavy precipitation patterns your people expect. I watched in amazement as Jesus revealed the intricate details of weather systems I'd never paid attention to before. He showed me how this northeastern storm was actually paired with Hurricane Melissa's energy, creating a complex atmospheric interaction that was bringing those powerful winds to New England, even as the medical team worked to revive my heart. By tomorrow, this system will weaken and move out to sea, Jesus continued, but the atmospheric changes it creates will set up everything that follows. He then turned my attention to the southern plains and Gulf Coast regions, which appeared remarkably calm and quiet from our heavenly vantage point. Ahmed, I want you to pay careful attention to what I'm about to show you about the southeast, Jesus said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute foreknowledge. Beginning Sunday, November 3rd, a sneaky storm system will begin developing. Your meteorologists are not seeing this clearly yet, but I'm orchestrating every atmospheric pressure change, every temperature gradient, every wind current that will create this system. As he spoke, I watched the future weather patterns unfold before my eyes. Sunday into Monday, a storm system would organize across the Ohio Valley. then intensify as it moved toward the southeast. Georgia, South Carolina, and the Carolinas will experience strong to severe thunderstorms with high wind gusts, Jesus revealed. This will be the beginning of a dramatic weather pattern change that will culminate on November 8th. The precision was astounding. Jesus wasn't speaking in generalities or vague predictions. He was showing me specific geographic regions, exact time frames, and detailed meteorological phenomena with the authority of someone who controlled every molecule of water vapor in the atmosphere. Jesus then revealed something that would haunt my thoughts for days to come. He showed me the current jet stream pattern, that massive river of air flowing high above North America that controls our weather systems. Look at this large dip across the Central Plains extending all the way to the East Coast, he said, and I could see it as clearly as if I were looking at a three-dimensional weather map floating in space before us. This pattern is bringing cold air across the Southern Plains today, the very day your heart stopped beating, Jesus explained. But Ahmed, by this weekend, everything will shift dramatically. The jet stream will transform into what meteorologists call a zonal flow, moving west to east with very little curvature. Monday and Tuesday will be remarkably calm across most of the United States because of this pattern change. What Jesus showed me next, about November 8th, sent chills through my spiritual being. Remember this date above all others, Ahmed, November 8th, 2025. This is when everything I'm revealing to you will culminate in ways that will remove every doubt about our encounter. He gestured, and I watched future weather systems form with supernatural clarity. A very strong, low-pressure system will eject over the Rocky Mountains on November 7th and 8th. Jesus continued, his voice carrying the authority of someone who orchestrated every atmospheric movement. This will mark the return of severe weather to the Great Plains and the first significant snowfall for multiple states. Kansas and Nebraska will see snow. Wisconsin and Illinois will experience their first real winter weather. Some areas will face temperature drops of 15 to 25 degrees within hours. The precision was overwhelming. Jesus wasn't speaking in general terms about seasonal changes. He was revealing specific temperature variations, exact geographic locations, and detailed timing that would occur exactly 10 days from my death experience. When these events unfold precisely as I'm showing you, your scientific mind will have to acknowledge that human forecasting could never achieve such accuracy so far in advance. Then Jesus directed my attention to the Pacific coast, where I could see massive moisture streams preparing to make landfall. Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, watch for a big atmospheric river event hitting the West Coast. Heavy rainfall will saturate California, Oregon, and Washington, while significant snow accumulations will build in the higher elevations of the Sierra Nevada and Cascade Mountain ranges. The energy from this western storm system will move over the Rocky Mountains by Thursday, Jesus continued, showing me how weather patterns connected across the entire continent, like pieces of a divine puzzle. This will bring snow and rain across the Rocky Mountain region, but more importantly, it will feed energy into that powerful storm system I showed you forming over the Great Plains on Friday. As I watched these weather patterns unfold in fast-forward motion, Jesus began explaining the spiritual significance behind what he was revealing. Every storm, every moment of calm, every season change serves my purposes. Ahmed, Weather is never random or chaotic. I speak through the thunder and I whisper through gentle breezes. These dramatic pattern changes represent the spiritual transformation that's about to occur in your own life. The implications of what Jesus was telling me began to sink in with terrifying clarity. Jesus offered me a choice that would forever change my understanding of life and death. You can stay here with me in perfect peace, Ahmed. No more earthly struggles. No more religious confusion. No more pain or uncertainty. Just eternal rest in my presence. The offer was incredibly tempting. The peace surrounding us was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. And part of me wanted nothing more than to remain in that divine embrace forever. But as I considered his words, my thoughts turned to my family. I could still see Fatima collapsed on her prayer rug in that hospital hallway, her body shaking with grief as she begged Allah to bring her husband back to their children. I thought about 8-year-old Layla, who would wake up this morning expecting to see her father at breakfast. 6-year-old Omar, who was supposed to practice soccer with me after school today. Little Zara, only 4 years old, who still crawled into our bed during thunderstorms because she felt safest between her parents. Jesus, Bray, I want to stay with you more than anything, I said, my heart breaking with the decision I had to make. But my family needs me. And if these weather events you've shown me will prove this encounter was real, then I have to return to tell people what I've experienced. Jesus smiled with such profound love and understanding that I knew he had expected this choice all along. Remember November 8th, specifically, Ahmed, when those storms form exactly as I've shown you, when the temperatures drop precisely as I've revealed, when the atmospheric river hits the west coast, at the exact time I've predicted, you will have undeniable proof that this encounter was real. Do not doubt when the persecution comes. Do not waver when your family turns against you. Every single detail you've witnessed will unfold with perfect precision. The moment Jesus finished speaking, I felt a powerful pulling sensation, like an invisible rope was yanking me back toward earth at incredible speed. I was being drawn back through the tunnel of light, back toward the hospital room where my physical body lay. The journey back felt different from the journey away from my body. This time, I could see my destination clearly. I could see Dr. Chen and her medical team still working frantically over my lifeless form, and I could hear their voices growing clearer as I approached. We've been at this for 23 minutes, Dr. Chen was saying to her team, her voice filled with exhaustion and defeat. Should we call it? I don't think we're going to get him back. Just as she spoke those words, I slammed back into my physical body with tremendous force. The impact was like being hit by a truck, but instead of pain, I felt an overwhelming rush of life force flooding back into every cell. My lungs expanded with the deepest breath I'd ever taken. My heart resumed its rhythm with powerful, steady beats, and every nerve ending in my body suddenly blazed back to life. I gasped so loudly that it startled the entire medical team. The heart monitor, which had shown nothing but a flat line for 23 minutes, suddenly displayed a strong, regular heartbeat pattern that made everyone in the room freeze in amazement. The first words out of my mouth were barely audible, but they would change everything. Jesus is real, I whispered, still gasping from the shock of re-entering my body. Dr. Chen later told me she had never witnessed such a complete medical reversal in 20 years of emergency medicine. No brain damage, no cardiac damage, no explanation for how someone could be clinically dead for 23 minutes and returned with perfect vital signs. Fatima rushed into the room when she heard the commotion, tears streaming down her face as she saw me sitting up in bed, fully conscious and alert. "Ahmed, what happened? You were gone for so long," she sobbed, grabbing my hands. My 3 children followed close behind her. Layla threw her arms around my neck. Omar climbed onto the hospital bed. And little Zara kept saying, "Baba came back from Jannah," over and over again. How could I possibly explain to them that I had been to Jannah, but it wasn't what any of us had expected? How could I tell my devoutly Muslim family that I had encountered Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, not just as the Prophet Isa we honored in Islam? My father, Imam Rashid, arrived within the hour and immediately led our family in prayers of gratitude to Allah for this miracle. Everyone assumed this was a divine intervention from Allah, and they were absolutely right, just not in the way they understood. For the next several days, I tried dropping subtle hints to Fatima about my experience. "I saw Jesus during those 23 minutes, I told her one evening as we lay in bed. Her reaction was immediate and filled with concern. "Ahmed, Habibti, you must have suffered some kind of brain injury. Jesus is just a prophet, not someone who appears to Muslims at death. The doctors need to run more tests." She scheduled multiple appointments for MRIs, cognitive evaluations, and neurological assessments. Every single test came back completely normal. My brain function was perfect, but my spiritual reality had been transformed forever. The internal struggle became unbearable. When I tried to perform my daily Islamic prayers, I felt an overwhelming compulsion to pray directly to Jesus, instead of through the traditional Islamic format I had followed for over 20 years. When I read familiar verses from the Quran, passages I had memorized since childhood suddenly seemed to point toward Jesus as divine rather than merely prophetic. The Quranic references to Jesus as Ruh Allah and Kalimatullah took on entirely new meaning after my encounter. But I couldn't share any of this with anyone without causing catastrophic upheaval in my family and community. So I began what I now call my secret research phase. I obsessively monitored every weather website, news outlet, and meteorological service available. I wrote down every specific detail Jesus had revealed about the coming weather patterns, creating a detailed timeline of predictions that I could verify as they unfolded. The first confirmations came immediately. Hurricane Melissa's path was tracking exactly as Jesus had shown me. The northeastern storm with its high winds and rainfall had occurred precisely during my death experience, just as he had revealed. The quiet conditions across the Gulf Coast and southern plains matched perfectly. Even the weak low-pressure system over North Dakota that Jesus had mentioned was confirmed in every weather report I checked. But the real test would come on November 8th.